is December the 16th. This is the 18th day of our Advent story. Now remember, we left off where Ishtar had just hung his head in shame for his new friend Jotham. This chapter is called Jotham's Journey. Let's find out why Ishtar was doing that. Jotham appeared shocked. Well, why, he asked. Because many men were killed on my account? Ishtar sucked in his breath, then slowly shook his head. No, he said, I am embarrassed for you because you have to make up stories to impress me. In my land, this is called the Paz de Dawn, the building of a false image. Ishtar, Jotham said through his teeth, his anger evident. Everything I told you is the truth. Ishtar shook his head slowly again and avoided looking at Jotham. Finally, Jotham pulled Ishtar to his feet and said, Follow me. Nathan and Salamar were sitting around a fire drinking tea as Jotham and Ishtar appeared. Salamar was just saying, No matter what, we will need to stop in Jerusalem to pay respects to your elders, and I have sent men ahead to inquire about the new king. Then he saw Ishtar and frowned. Ishtar, why do you hang your head in shame? Ishtar fidgeted, not wanting to tell on his friend. Ishtar, answer, his father commanded. Slowly, painfully, Ishtar said, My friend Jotham has made the Paz de Dawn. Ishtar's father looked from Jotham to Nathan and back and then to his son. What did he tell you? Ishtar gave a brief summary, now trying to make it sound less preposterous in order to keep Jotham's punishment to a minimum. When he finished, Nathan began laughing, and he laughed so hard he fell on his side and knocked over the pitcher of tea. Ishtar, he said, wiping his eyes, everything Jotham told you is absolutely true. Ishtar's eyes grew as wide as a grapefruit. But this cannot be, he said, slumping to the ground. My friend Jotham is no older than myself to have such adventures. Ishtar looked at Jotham like he was a holy man, but now it was Jotham who hung his head. It is true, he said. That much has happened to me in the last days. But all of this happened, Ishtar, because I did a bad thing. Nathan's friend Silas lives no more because of my disobedience. It was quiet for a moment, and then Salamar said, It is a wise man who recognizes the fruits of his errors. It is a compassionate man who regrets that fruit. You are truly becoming a man, Jotham of Jericho. Jotham smiled his thanks to Salamar, then to Nathan. Jotham, my friend, Salamar and his caravan are headed west toward Jerusalem. He has agreed to take you as far as his course allows. Ishtar looked at his father for confirmation. When his father nodded, Ishtar grinned a wide grin. He not only had a new friend, but that friend would be traveling with them. Now nothing could possibly spoil this glorious journey. That night, a huge banquet was held in Nathan's honor. He and Salamar told many boring stories about their youth. In celebration of old warriors reunited, Salamar had told the assembly at the beginning of the meal. And to thank the gods that my friend is safe and well. There is only one God, you know, Ishtar heard Nathan say, a mischievous grin on his lips. Salamar had laughed and said, So there is for you, my brother, and perhaps so shall there one day be for me. Ishtar could see that it was an old game the two played, but of course it's ridiculous that his father would ever think there would only be one God. Salamar presented Nathan with the gift of the scroll, and Nathan was most pleased. His uncle's wives even performed a dance for entertainment. Late in the evening, Kazim led Ishtar and Jotham back to Ishtar's tent for bed. I believe I will like having you travel with us, Ishtar said as they lay watching the stars. I believe I will too, Jotham said. A moment later he asked, Why are you in Palestine? Where are you going? We follow the stars, Ishtar said. My father and uncles are the royal astronomers for His Majesty Sheikh Konarak of Amaranth. Jotham stared at Ishtar in astonishment. Your father and uncles are royalty? Ishtar laughed. No, not royalty, but high government officials. Then he added, Well, in our country, I guess it's kind of the same thing. Jotham thought for a moment. Then you are royalty too. Ishtar didn't want to answer, but knew it would be impolite not to. I'm sort of a prince, he said, as if apologizing for some misdeed. "A prince!" Jotham shouted. He thought for several moments and then said, "This afternoon when you introduced Kazim, you started to say he was your bodyguard, didn't you?" Ishtar nodded slightly. He had never in his 11 years realized what a privileged life he led until he began meeting people from not so much fortune. "Why are you here?" Jotham asked. Ishtar told Jotham the story of finding the star and bringing a message and gifts from the sheik. Jotham scrunched up his face. "A message for whom?" he asked. "Why, for your new king, of course," Ishtar answered. "What new king?" Ishtar raised up one arm and stared at his friend. "The new king that is soon to be born to your people. Surely you know of this great thing." Jotham shook his head slowly, looking lost. I don't know," he stammered, and then his eyes grew wide and he shouted, "The Messiah?" "Messiah?" Ishtar said. "Yes, the Messiah I told you about, the one whose cousin I will be." "It is as if the gods wanted us to meet," Ishtar said. "Maybe he did," Jotham answered, "but I still do not understand why you are here. We bring greetings and gifts to your new king, gold, frankincense, and myrrh." And as soon as he said it, Ishtar realized he shouldn't have, but Jotham just shrugged. "Why those gifts?" "Gold, because he is a king. Frankincense, because it is the finest and most expensive fragrance of our country. And myrrh, because it has many uses and is also an expensive product of our country." After that, the two talked excitedly through the night. Early the next morning, before the sun was even up, Kazim woke up the two boys. "We are leaving," he said. "We must find new pasture." The boys both knew it was impolite for a large caravan to stay too long outside of town and use up all its feed. They barely had time to get dressed and devour some meat and cheese before the tents were torn down and packed onto the camels. Jotham gave Nathan a long hug goodbye while Ishtar pretended to be checking Moose's straps. "Jehovah willing, we shall see each other again soon," Nathan said, and then he turned to Ishtar and added, "Perhaps I shall have a chance to get to know you better someday." "It would be a blessing on my house," Ishtar replied, even though he didn't have a house of his own yet. Just as the sun rose behind them, casting a long shadow off their feet, the caravan molded itself smoothly into a single line ahead, away from Jericho and into the hills of Judea, where Salamar knew of a meadow where they could wait for the star. As the two boys walked beside Musa, Jotham looked at all the women in the caravan and said, "Ishtar, is your mother among the wives of your father?" Ishtar felt his throat tighten. "My mother is not living," he said. "She died when I was born. She was my father's first wife, and he has never taken another." Jotham seemed to want to know more, but he didn't ask, and Ishtar was glad of it. All day the caravan trudged up the steep path into the hills, and Ishtar was deep in thought most of the way. They ate their lunch as they walked, and Ishtar explained to Jotham how you never ever stop a caravan unless you're ready to water the camels. Finally, they reached a cool meadow with a small stream. The sun was just beginning to set, and the tents were quickly raised. Ishtar was grateful when they could finally sit by a fire and eat some dinner. Salamar and his brothers didn't eat, but instead stood around with their instruments looking into the sky. Ishtar fell into deep thought again as he stared into the fire. He didn't even notice that Jotham had wandered off until Salamar came and sat to eat his dinner in the place where Jotham had been. He looked around and saw Jotham a short distance from the camp, sitting at the base of a lone olive tree and staring into the sky. "You are very quiet this evening, my son. Is there trouble in your heart?" Ishtar hesitated and then said, "In my heart and in my head." "Tell me of this trouble." Ishtar squirmed and then said, "Father, what happened when I was born?" Salamar stopped with his food halfway to his mouth. He put it back down and spent several moments wiping his hands on a cloth. "It is a very difficult thing for me to speak of." After several moments, he added, "But you have a right to know. When you were born, there was a problem, and you could not come out of your mother in the normal way. The physician tried to save you and your mother, but alas, your mother was injured too badly. But it was not your fault." Ishtar thought about this for a long moment and then asked, "And what of Kazim? Why has he been my bodyguard from that day?" Salamar looked to where Kazim stood and nodded to him. "The time has come," he said. Kazim sat next to Ishtar and took a deep breath. "Your mother, father, and I were all very close friends," he said. "When the physician said there was a problem, your mother told him to save you no matter what. She knew your father would have many other responsibilities, so she looked to me and made me promise that I would keep you safe until you were a man." Ishtar thought about that a long time and then said, "So you are not a slave, nor even a servant. You are truly a friend to my father and to me." Kazim looked at Shalimar for permission and then back to Ishtar. "Yes, that is true," he said. Ishtar stared back into the fire and pondered these things in his heart. Shalimar finished his meal quietly, then stood with a sigh and walked away. From a distance, Ishtar heard his father say something about a boy sitting alone, but he was thinking so hard about his mother and father and Kazim that he ignored it. He was just forming some questions when he heard his father shouting. Ishtar looked up and saw that the entire caravan was scrambling to take down the tents and load the camels. "We leave at once," he heard echoed around the camp. Ishtar set his questions aside and began to help as he knew his father would want. He had for the moment forgotten all about Jotham until his new friend came running up crying. "Jotham, what is it? What's happening?" Ishtar yelled over the excitement in the camp. "I do not know," Jotham said. "All I did was look at a star and everyone got upset." Ishtar nodded knowingly, patted his friend on the shoulder and said, "You get a lot of that around here." And that's the end of today. If we still lived in the Garden of Eden, everything would be perfect. There would be no pain, no hunger, no death, and no hurt. But God had to banish Adam and Eve from the garden as a consequence of their self-centeredness, and things have never been perfect since then. So we live in a world where there's pain, there's hunger, there's death, and there's hurt. It helps us bear all that when we at least have someone who comforts us and provides for us and kisses our wounds. Ishtar is sad that he has no mother, and nothing can ever make that pain go away entirely. But besides his father, Ishtar's mother also left Kazim to watch over and care for him in every way. She left him to be a bodyguard and a friend to Ishtar. That's exactly what God did for us when he sent Jesus to be our closest friend, and then the Holy Spirit to guard us. 2 Corinthians 1:3 says, "Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, and Father of compassion and God of all comfort." I'll see you tomorrow.